and shocking tales of vengeance in the history of cinema.
You should be more concerned with why I'm alive, bitch. It's just you and I.
We are talking Hell Nurse. And this is a very low budget movie directed and written by Bobby Blood. Blood is a musician by trade, I believe, but has branched out into the world of filmmaking. Now this, as I say, very low budget, so low budget, it's pretty much the chains at the back of your sofa. The budget was around $3,500. That's how low budget it was. And this movie is trying to be on the style of a kind of 70s Grindhouse movie. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And it focuses on this kind of novice nurse who is looking after an elderly couple. And then one night there's a knock on the door and there is three bank robbers that are kind of getting away from a job and want to hide out in their house and ultimately kill the older couple and rape her, and then they think they could have killed her, but she's actually kind of manages to kind of survive. She ends up at this kind of like psychiatric institution where she meets another young girl who is au fait with devil worship and agrees that she's going to kind of pledge her soul to Satan in return for getting revenge. What'll happen? Well, you'll have to watch the movie to find out. But I bet you can probably guess. Anyway, let's talk about Hell Nurse. So we have to bear in mind the budget of this one. $3,500. You're not going to get a professional product. So when I try and rate movies, I try and base it on the best that this could possibly be ultimately with a budget of $3,500. What can I say that works? Now, one thing I did enjoy that this movie did was some of the kind of the stylistic choices. What do I mean? So, for example, there's a sequence where the nurse, when she's kind of like in this, at the beginning of the movie, she's with this kind of older couple putting away the groceries. And all of the kind of the labels in the groceries just kind of say like food and like juice and things like that. It's like a plain white label. And it kind of reminded me of like They Live. But it was just such an interesting kind of choice that it's obviously just a kind of a generic, like it's super bland kind of like labels and stuff. Which I don't know. I thought it was kind of quite funny. It just gave it this like we can't have any kind of branded products in here, but it still will have the most super generic labels you'll ever see. I kind of liked it. There's also the choice here to give this a kind of a an old-fashioned feel by having kind of grain, cigarette burns and things like this. Now this might have been done to kind of try and hide some of the kind of the shortcomings, but the kind of the knock-on effect is that we have this kind of, a stylistic film which is made to kind of, look like movies from the 70s. And we know it's from the 70s because we hear on the radio that Death Wish is coming out on the cinema, which was, I believe, 1974. So we can imagine that's the kind of the era this is taking place. And to be honest with them, they do a reasonable job here with some of the kind of props and things like this, and the kind of the costuming to give it a kind of a 70s kind of feel to it. And again, we got to bear in mind the sort of budget here. The car, there's a couple of kind of like car shots and things like old kind of cars. So again, I think certainly for the budget, there's a good attempt here to kind of have it in kind of a period kind of setting. The movie, it has somewhat of a weird pace, which we'll come on to. But when we do have our violence on screen, it's kind of over the top, kind of gory fun. Again, this is a lower budget movie, not expecting particularly kind of realistic prosthetics here. But what we do see, I gotta say, I kind of quite enjoyed from really kind of like there's kind of two scenes really that are super gory. The kind of the raid at the beginning of the movie where these criminals come into this house and kill the kind of the two older people, and the kind of the bloody kind of revenge towards the end of the movie. But when we do see kind of gore it's kind of a little bit hokey. Let's just, let's not kid ourselves. But I kind of still found it kind of quite fun. Our nurse, she's kind of goes from being a somewhat kind of shy introvert, bookish type to a, tattooed, busty kind of like hell nurse at the end of the movie. So I found her, those of you who like the kind of like the Russ Meyer kind of style of vixens, I think you may want to check it out. It's kind of quite fun in regards to, buxom babes and all that kind of stuff. The movie's quite a short film. It's a very straightforward plot. It runs at about 71 minutes, I believe, so it doesn't kind of, waste too much time with unnecessary scenes, kind of. Put an asterisk in that. So, it's a relatively kind of punchy film. It's a very, very straightforward plot. There's not really much to it, certainly in regards to kind of script or anything like that. But yeah, it's kind of, it does what it intends to do. It does. You're probably not watching this expecting a particularly kind of complex plot with lots of kind of twists and turns and things like that. It's really just a simple kind of like revenge flick and things like that. It's a little bit of fun. It's a little bit of kind of hokey, grimy, gritty fun. I think if you appreciate the kind of a B-movie schlock, then you'll like this kind of like gritty Grindhouse movie. I think that's probably fair to say. However, let's transition to what doesn't work. Now, again, I'm going to try and be a bit fair in regards to the kind of the budgetary things. I'm not going to critique it too much for stuff which is simply carnival, but I will kind of mention a couple of things. The set design, we have kind of like just kind of sheets hanging up on the wall at times to try and give us the impression that it's some type of kind of like medical facility or it's a little bit of hokey green screen. I think there maybe could have been a little bit better locations used here. I don't know the reasons why we have these kind of like weird kind of like just sheets hanging up all the time. But surely it wouldn't have cost that much to find like an office or something, maybe. I don't know. That was a little bit distracting, to be honest with you. The gore, the kind of the practical effects I'm forgiving of. They were good enough for this kind of level of movie. The thing I think that maybe I would critique this movie the most for, quite a long second act. We don't get much in the way of, horror elements or anything kind of too grindhousey. It just kind of feels like it's spinning its wheels a little bit in the kind of the second act. So although I think certainly there are elements of the first act and elements of the third act I think would give you what you're expecting. The second act I think does suffer from a little bit of kind of stagnation. Really, it just kind of feels like is this movie you feel like it's getting on a bit now? You can think is anything going to happen? So there's that. The acting, I'm not sure if this was a conscious decision or if it was, the budget was $3,500, but the acting is not good. I think they kind of lean into it. It's meant to be kind of hokey. It's meant to be a little bit kind of, silly and unbelievable and leaning into that kind of that 70s kind of like B-movie aesthetic. I get it. But when you're watching it, obviously, it's hard to really take the movie seriously. I think maybe people who aren't in on the joke may just look at this and thinking, my God, what am I watching? It looks like just some amateur kind of production here. And then the kind of things like the lighting and stuff like that, again, it's suffering from the kind of the budget. I didn't really feel like we got to know our main nurse. She just seems like a little bit of a caricature. She's kind of shy and nervous, and that's just kind of like it. I didn't really feel like I get to know her personally, if that makes sense. I didn't really feel like I got to know any real personality. And that's partly down to, I think, a very basic script. It's partly down to the performance, and I think it's partly down to the kind of just the way the movie is made on a technical level, something like the ADR and things like that. You never really feel like you're ever really kind of buying into any of the characters. Again, it's not trying to be anything kind of deep. It's trying to be schlocky. It's trying to be hokey. It's trying to be kind of like gritty or grimy. But yeah, it kind of feels like somewhat of a surface level You know, there's not characters you can really root for, I don't think. Maybe this story needed to be a little bit more kind of going on with it as well. It just seems a little bit too kind of like simply an A to B kind of storyline, if that makes sense. So, you know, I think it's a fun movie to a certain degree. I don't think it's going to be for kind of mainstream audiences, certainly. Those of you who like a schlocky movie, you know, we do lots of kind of B movies here. So many of you may well enjoy this kind of thing. This is designed to be a schlocky B movie, which I kind of appreciate. And I watched this and kind of was entertained. But I critically can't say this is necessarily a you know, a fantastic movie. Certainly for most people, I think this is really going to be down to the kind of the hardcore kind of B movie junkies. I mean, it doesn't go as far as, I mean, there's some boobs in it. There's kind of a implied rape, but it's not particularly kind of hardcore. I feel one where they could have gone was really lean into the kind of the nastiness of having a kind of a low budget kind of Grindhouse movie and have you know, a little bit more nastiness with the kind of the violence and gore, and certainly with the kind of the implied kind of rape and all this. It just seems like they kind of pull back a little bit and end up being a little bit too schlocky. And I think if they had gone in a bit harder, it might have appealed more to the kind of like the real, you know, the gore hounds, that the kind of like that are into like those guinea pig movies or whatever they're called. Anyway, so for me, it's a kind of a 4 out of 10. I think it's a fun effort. I think it's going to appeal to those of you who like low budget schlock, but maybe not to other people. Anyway, so if you have seen it, do let me know what you think of it, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.